You brought a knife to a jungle moon? Vrog sneered, his mandibles clicking with delight as he kicked mud onto Leah's boots. What are you gonna do, carve fruit while we bleed? Laughter rippled through the alien bandits, hulking mercs with plasma scars, jagged armor, and teeth like rusted saws. None of them expected her to respond. She didn't. Leah Hale just tightened the leather strap around her wrist, glanced at the horizon of neon vines, and whispered something so softly it was nearly drowned by the dropship's engines. Something that made one bandit nearest her step back without knowing why. That's when the growl came. Low. Ancient. Close. And the trees behind her shifted as if making room for something much, much larger. The planet Tavra 4 was not meant for humans. It was a planet of bite-first diplomacy, where the oxygen came with spores, and the water bit you back. The kind of place merc companies sent recruits they wanted to bury without the politics of a body bag. It had 3 suns, no laws, and a jungle canopy so thick you could get eaten before you ever saw the sky. And into this came Leah, barely 5.5 feet tall, skin too smooth, boots too new, and expression too blank for the horrors around her. She looked like she'd wandered in from a schoolyard simulation. The aliens in her squad were mercenaries who made their reputation skinning sentient reptiles and turning them into wallets. They stood around her, armored in scrap, with weapons that still dripped from their last hunt. She had a standard-issue rifle and a whistle tied to her belt with cord. She wasn't even holding it like a threat, just letting it dangle like a forgotten key. Vrog, the biggest of them, was already testing her. He was the type that didn't believe in orders, only pecking orders. He sniffed her once and laughed. He'd killed 3 officers in the last year, and wore their badges on a chain around his arm. He reached for the strap of her bag, sneering, but Leah stepped back, not quickly, not with panic, just enough. Just precise. Like someone who had memorized the weight of every leaf on her body, and every root under her boot. That still didn't stop him. He yanked the bag anyway. She let it go. He opened it. Found food packs, field meds, flares, and one small strip of dried meat in its own sealed pouch, wrapped in cloth. Vrog held it up, confused. This your dinner, soft skin? She didn't answer. He tore it in half. The growl returned. Closer this time. Something crashed in the brush. Not like a charge. More like an arrival. A presence. The kind of sound a jungle makes when it remembers it has an apex. All eyes turned. Except Leah's. She was already looking at it. A shape in the mist, taller than any of them. Bone armor, moss along its shoulders, claws the size of femurs. A predator designed by evolution and violence. Its mouth opened sideways, revealing layered fangs that shimmered like obsidian. And then it sat. Behind Leah. Just sat. Breathing like a furnace. Watching them. Not her. Someone dropped their weapon. Don't move. Someone else muttered. No, Leah said for the first time. Just don't step behind me. They didn't. Not one of them. Vrog looked like he'd swallowed a live mine. The predator made a huffing sound, low and sharp, like a half-chuff, half-growl, and Leah reached into the bag, pulled out the remaining strip of jerky, and tossed it over her shoulder. The beast caught it midair with a crunch. Everyone stood frozen. Half the squad had their guns half raised. The other half looked like they wanted to run but had no idea in which direction wouldn't kill them faster. The predator stared at each of them, one by one. Then turned and disappeared into the mist again, silent as a shadow. Gone as if it had never been there. Except for the paw print left behind, 2 feet wide, sunk nearly 6 inches into the mud. Leah picked up her bag. Slid it back on. Looked around. Any more questions? Nobody spoke. Nobody laughed. The jungle did, though. It cackled above them, rustling with echoing howls and distant cries. Things died here all the time. It was the tone of the death that decided what killed them. The team began their march. They had a job to do, recover power cores from a freighter that had crashed beyond the ridge of spines. They were told it would be a simple salvage run. They knew that was a lie. Everything on Tavra 4 was a test of death. The trail narrowed. The trees dripped with acidic moss. Insects large enough to carry knives buzzed low. Liam moved like she knew the path already. Her eyes never darted. Her steps never hesitated. She stepped over certain roots. She nudged aside certain leaves with her elbow instead of her hand. She touched nothing without smelling the air first. She was either very lucky, or she'd been here before. The others took note. Quietly. Uneasily. None of them liked that she didn't brag. Bragging was how you measured worth out here. If you weren't shouting, you were hiding. If you were hiding, you were prey. And yet, Leah didn't hide. She just moved. And the jungle never touched her. That scared them more than if she'd had a gun bigger than theirs. By the time they stopped for a rest under the root fang trees, the mocking had dried up. No one tried to take her gear. Vrog hadn't said a word since the paw print. But his eyes never left the whistle on her belt. Neither did the rest of the teams. Then, right as they prepared to continue, something shrieked in the canopy. A sound like metal being ripped in half by a scream. Everyone froze. Leah tilted her head. Smiled, just a little. They found Vrog's scent, she said softly. What does that mean? Someone asked, already raising his blaster. It means, she answered, slinging her bag over her shoulder. You shouldn't have torn the meat. And behind them, somewhere deep in the trees, something began to move again. Something that didn't mock. It just followed. The jungle had moods. Tavra 4 was not passive terrain but a living beast, layered in fangs and foliage. The deeper the squad marched, the more the air changed. It wasn't just thicker, it was watchful. Trees leaned closer. Leaves shifted without wind. The vines dangled like veins, and once or twice, one of the newer bandits swore they saw a tree blink. But no one said anything aloud. Not after what they saw behind Leah. That predator, whatever it was, didn't just appear, it chose. And it had chosen her. Leah didn't speak much on the trail, but she never looked lost. She walked with a silent cadence, eyes occasionally flicking toward the ground, not in fear, but in recognition. Every root, every groove in the mud seemed familiar. She avoided glowing fungi without needing to test them. She adjusted her stride just before invisible stingers burst from the brush. Even when a predator worm, long as a hoverbike, erupted beside them and snagged a squirrel-sized crawler from a branch, Leah only stepped 2 paces left. She didn't jump. She didn't flinch. The bandits, however, screamed like rookies. One even fired his rifle at the worm's shadow as it vanished underground. Leah didn't look back. She just muttered, "It's feeding time. Don't bleed near the nest." They stared at her. The one who shot the worm's shadow, a thin, horned alien named Brack, snorted and muttered something in his native tongue, likely an insult. Leah said nothing. But she unwrapped another piece of jerky and let it drop behind her boot, where it was silently taken by something unseen in the underbrush. The others didn't miss that. They started keeping track. The girl didn't flinch from the jungle, and the jungle didn't touch her. Hours passed. The heat didn't ease. The sun that pierced the canopy bled orange, and spores swirled in the thick air like pollen filled with secrets. The squad moved through it like invaders in someone else's cathedral. Then, just as the terrain began to slope, Vrog broke off from the group. He didn't announce it. He didn't ask. He just veered left through a tangle of spined ferns, muttering something about getting to the wreck faster. No one stopped him. Not even the commander. In fact, a few looked relieved. He was too big, too loud, and more dangerous to his own team than anything else. Leah paused for a moment. She watched the spot where Vrog disappeared, her head tilting slightly like she was listening to something beneath the wind. Then she kept walking. She didn't warn him. That wasn't her job. The next hour was quiet. Too quiet. Even the insects muted their wings. The jungle doesn't mourn loudly. It digests in silence. When they found Vrog's trail again, it was marked by his boots, one upright, the other shredded. His rifle was impaled on a branch 10 feet above the ground, and below it hung his arm. Still armored. Still twitching from nerve pulses. The rest of him? Gone. There was no blood. Just a smear of saliva and some crushed brush where something massive had moved. A predator's lair, maybe. Or just a warning sight. None of the bandits spoke. Not even Brack. The trees didn't need help delivering the message. But then, something new caught their eye. Below the branch, nestled in a cleared patch of moss, was a pile. It was wet. Warm. Digesting. Vrog's helmet sat on top of it like a trophy. Next to it was the remaining half of the jerky he had torn. It hadn't been eaten. It had been returned. As if to say, not yours. Leah stepped forward, crouched beside the pile, and pulled out a strip of dried meat from her pouch. She didn't flinch at the stench or the steam. She placed the meat gently at the edge of the pile. Then stood. The bandits stared in horror. She looked up at them. She eats what I give her, Leah said plainly. Not what she finds. One of the older aliens cursed under his breath. Another made a warding gesture with his claws. They all looked to the treeline now, not just for threats, but for approval. Or mercy. Is that thing following us? Someone finally asked. No, Leah said. We're following her. They moved on, more slowly this time. Nobody joked. No one dared take the lead. Leah walked in front now without argument. Her position had changed, not by vote or order, but by death. That was how the jungle promoted. Behind them, the predator's trail was obvious to Leah but invisible to the rest. She saw the shifts in moss, the way the bark had been brushed by fur, the low tremble in the leaves when it breathed. It was close. Not stalking. Escorting. The squad camped near dusk at the base of a root arch. Giant trees curved above them like the ribs of some buried god. The air grew cooler, and the forest's noises deepened. Leah didn't rest with the others. She patrolled in a slow loop around the camp's edge, whistling once, soft and rhythmic. There was no answer, not directly. But something distant howled, and every creature within earshot went silent. When she sat down near the fire, she didn't warm her hands. She opened her pack, pulled out a small metal comb, and cleaned the predator fur tangled around her wrist strap. It was short, dense, dark. Not from a wild swipe, but from years of contact. It was the kind of grooming you only did for something you knew personally. Intimately. One of the younger bandits couldn't take the tension anymore. What is that thing? He asked, voice too tight. What did you do to it? Leah didn't answer immediately. She stared into the fire. Her eyes weren't haunted, they were focused. Like she was remembering specific moments, and weighing whether this one deserved to join them. I fed her when she was dying, she said at last. I pulled spears from her paws. Cleaned her wounds. Watched her sleep with her ribs showing. She never forgot. The silence that followed wasn't disbelief, it was comprehension. The predator didn't just follow Leah because of food. It followed her because of debt. And loyalty. And maybe something deeper, something beyond language. You tamed her? Another asked, voice barely audible. Leah looked at him, then looked away. No one tames the jungle, she said. You survived long enough to become part of it. That night, while the others pretended to sleep and rotated watch shifts, Leah sat alone beneath the root arch. She leaned back against the bark, whistled softly again. This time, a shape emerged at the edge of the clearing. Massive. Silent. Golden eyes catching the firelight. The apex predator didn't growl. It didn't posture. It just lowered itself beside her and placed its massive head on its paws. Leah reached over, stroked its ear, and let her fingers linger there. The moonlight dripped through the leaves like silver blood. The bandits didn't sleep. Not really. Not anymore. Because no one dared dream when something in the dark was watching you breathe. And smiling. By morning, the silence wasn't just a mood, it was a law. No one questioned Leah's position anymore. She woke before the others, already geared, already scanning the tree lines with the same quiet certainty of something not trying to stay alive, but maintaining the rhythm of a world that kills anything offbeat. The predator had vanished before dawn, but not completely. Its tracks remained, perfectly placed just outside the edge of the camp, surrounding them like a drawn circle. A message, or maybe a boundary. The bandits noticed. Brack tried to cover his unease by mocking the shape in the dirt, until Lia pointed out that they weren't the predator's tracks. They were hers. The predator had walked beside her during the entire night watch, placing its feet in her footsteps like a shadow retracing the past. After that, Brack didn't say much else. They marched in single file now, but it wasn't discipline, it was fear disguised as order. The wreckage site wasn't far. The freighter had crashed into a canyon beyond the dense marshland, and they could already smell the scorched metal and see flashes of hull between the trees. But before they could reach it, the jungle shifted again. The smell of ash became tainted by something fouler. Old blood. Burnt chitin. Movement in the underbrush didn't scurry anymore, it slithered. Lia stopped without warning, causing a chain reaction of bumped shoulders and muttered curses behind her. She raised a hand, not dramatically, just enough to halt motion, and pointed to a single, narrow scratch carved into a nearby tree. It was high, too high for any human or average predator. "The hive passed through here," she said. The words weren't loud, but they punched through the group like a plasma shot. Hive meant only one thing: spine crawlers. Acid-veined, colony-bound death machines that moved as one organism and fought with hive intelligence. Creatures that didn't hunt. They harvested. And the only thing worse than crossing their trail was crossing it without knowing. The team froze. Their comms cracked with low chatter, nervous questions. The commander hissed into his mic, trying to reassert control. But Lia didn't wait. She stepped off the path and knelt near a gnarled root, brushing away moss to reveal more carvings, patterns etched not by claws but by hands. The markings were ritualistic, like coordinates or warnings. She recognized them. "When I was stranded here," she said calmly, "these led me away from their hives. They mark feeding trails. Avoid these and you live." One of the bandits, a gray-skinned brute named Kor, leaned in, squinting. "You expect us to follow tree scratches like cave paintings?" Lia didn't respond with words. She pulled back her sleeve instead. Beneath the leather were scars, deep, surgical, old. Not from weapons. From insect jaws. Spines. Burned into her skin like souvenirs from hell. Kor shut up immediately. The scars told their own story. The hive didn't just graze her once. It tried to take her apart piece by piece. And failed. They rerouted, following Lia's direction. It took longer, but no one argued now. The air around them grew thinner, charged with static. The hum of insect wings returned, not random, but rhythmic, like signal pulses. Hive scouts were near. Everyone lowered their voices instinctively. The predator didn't return. Not yet. But its absence felt deliberate, like it was clearing a path ahead or circling for threat interception. Lia kept moving, calm as ever. Her footfalls never snapped twigs. Her breathing stayed level. She glanced upward now and then, not to admire the jungle, but to spot silk threads too fine for anyone else to see. Threads that led to traps. Nets. Snares designed by creatures that didn't waste energy on prey that couldn't scream. Then came the bodies. 2 of them, stripped of armor and strung upside down in the trees. Not their squad, different uniforms. Another salvage team, probably from a rival faction. Their faces were untouched, but their torsos had been emptied with surgical precision. Still twitching in places. Brack turned pale. The commander ordered the group to move faster, but Lia halted again. This time she stepped into the clearing and knelt beside the nearest corpse. Her fingers brushed the edges of a strange residue on the tree bark. Not blood. Not hive fluid. Something else, older. A scent marker. Territorial. "She's been here," Lia said, standing slowly. "She warned them." "Warned them?" Someone hissed. "That thing can't write." "She doesn't need to." Lia replied. She kills loud enough. They passed beneath the bodies without speaking. The path ahead narrowed into a shallow gorge filled with fog and bone. Trees here grew sideways, twisted by gravity or something worse. Every few meters they passed markers, claw gouges, snapped branches, skulls of creatures not in any known database. Lia paused at one of them, reached into her bag, and retrieved a thin length of hide. She knotted it and placed it carefully around the skull. A sign of respect. Or a signal? No one asked? Then, without warning, plasma fire erupted from the tree line to their left. Raiders. Not jungle beasts or hives, but sentients. Armed. Tactical. The squad dove for cover as heat rounds tore through bark and armor. The commander bellowed orders, ducking behind a root ridge, already wounded. The bandits returned fire, but they were pinned. Someone screamed. The tree above them exploded. Amid the chaos, Lia was gone. Vanished. Slipped out of sight without a word. Just like in the old days when she was nothing but a shadow in the jungle. Then came the sound. One long whistle. High-pitched. Carried by the wind. The raiders paused, confused. One of them laughed. That's when the trees exploded. Not from grenades. From muscle. A blur of claws and bone burst through the canopy and landed in the center of the ambush. The apex predator. Not alone. Two others followed, smaller but no less deadly, moving in sync like a pack. They didn't just kill, they dissected. One raider was dragged into the trees mid-scream. Another was crushed beneath a paw and left twitching. The rest fled, dropping weapons and pride alike. When the dust cleared, Lia returned, unarmed, untouched, walking beside the apex. Its jaw was slick with blood. She didn't look shaken. She looked certain. The predator stopped beside a fallen raider, sniffed the body, then looked to Lia. She nodded once. The beast sat. Brack lowered his rifle slowly. His mouth opened, but no words came. Lia looked around at the scattered squad, at the steaming jungle floor, at the predator waiting patiently beside her. She's not the only one who remembers, she said. No one mocked her after that. Because now, they weren't just surviving the jungle. They were walking behind its queen. The wreckage site loomed ahead, half buried in overgrowth and twisted into the walls of a shallow canyon, its hull still scorched and hissing in places despite having crashed weeks ago. Smoke no longer rose from it, but a strange glow pulsed within the cracks, organic, not mechanical. It wasn't just wreckage anymore. Something had claimed it. The squad crept closer, weapons drawn, eyes darting, but even the bravest among them hesitated when they saw the walls. Hive resin coated every surface. It glistened with wetness, like the crash had triggered not just an alert but an invitation to the jungle's oldest predators. Spine crawlers. Their scent was thick in the air. It wasn't just rot or acid. It was memory. Death remembered by the earth itself. Lia didn't flinch. She stepped forward, scanning the markings on the rock, then whistled once, sharp and short. The sound echoed oddly, muffled as if the jungle held its breath. She stepped over a mound that wasn't soil but the hollowed husk of something once bipedal. The bandits hesitated. One by one they followed, because now it was more dangerous not to. The freighter's outer doors had been pried open, not blasted. Chitin claws had sliced through steel like butter. Inside, the air was damp and thick with clicking noises, not language, not communication, just presence. The hive wasn't attacking. Not yet. It was waiting. Lia moved through the narrow corridor like she had built it herself. She didn't carry a gun. She didn't need one. Her fingers brushed the walls lightly, as though checking for changes. The predator wasn't beside her now, but its absence felt more like cover than distance. A few meters in, they found the first nest. It was a dome of resin woven from synthetic fibers, bones, and organic pulp. 3 eggs pulsed inside it. One of them cracked open just as Brack leaned too close. Lia caught his shoulder before he fell forward. Her grip was steel. "Back," she whispered. A long leg unfolded from the egg, laced with poison barbs. Brack scrambled back. The egg withdrew slowly, like a trap that had missed its cue. Leah dropped a piece of meat beside it, one of her last, and nodded. The egg stilled. Behind her, Cor muttered something about her being more insect than human. She ignored him. She turned the corner, and the corridor widened into a cargo hold. The objective was here, power cores stacked against the far wall, half fused into the hive's webbing. They'd be heavy to extract. Loud. Time-consuming. And very, very dangerous. The commander stepped forward, scanning them with his helmet interface. Leah didn't move. "They're watching," she said. "We don't have time for caution," he snapped. "We get the cores, we get out. They'll let us leave," she said, her voice calm. "If I walk first." The others looked at her like she was insane, but none of them had a better idea. And no one wanted to test the hive's patience. Leah stepped forward, slowly. The eggs around the cargo shifted. The clicking noises grew louder. Then stopped. The silence was worse. She knelt beside the first core and tapped the resin gently. It cracked, releasing a hiss. No response. She glanced up, made eye contact with an unseen something in the darkness, and nodded once. A large silhouette retreated into the wall. The hive had accepted her presence. The commander waved the others forward. They began extracting the cores, one by one, while Leah stood watch, not guarding from the outside but from within. She kept whispering softly, words not meant for any of them. Not English. Not alien. Something primal. A language of sound and rhythm, not speech. The same language predators used when grooming their wounded, when mourning their dead. It wasn't learned in school. It was learned in silence, in survival, in days where there was nothing but pain and the need to keep moving. Suddenly, behind them, a voice broke the moment. It was Brack. "They're letting us go? Just like that?" Leah didn't respond. "They could kill us all," he said louder now. "Why don't they?" She turned slowly. "Because they remember what fear smells like," she said. "And they don't smell it on me." With that, she walked down the hallway they had entered through. The others followed, dragging cores, breathing shallow, ears tuned for betrayal. But nothing came. The hive watched them leave. That was enough. Outside, the jungle had changed again. Clouds gathered above the canopy. Not rain, just darkness. The predator was waiting, standing on a stone outcrop, eyes glowing faintly. It looked down at them like it was counting. Leah approached first. The creature growled low. Not aggressive. Just expectant. She reached into her bag, retrieved the last strip of meat, and held it in her palm. The beast took it gently. It leaned its head against her shoulder. She exhaled. Then, without a word, turned toward the squad. "We move fast from here," she said. "The jungle's patient, but not polite." They began to hike back, hauling the cores on hover sleds, checking the treetops with every step. But halfway down the trail, something changed. A thrum in the ground. A static charge in the air. Leah stopped cold. Her predator raised its head, sniffed. Then growled sharp. Not fear. Warning. "What is it?" someone asked. Leah didn't answer. She stepped forward, raised her hand to stop the group. Then, from the trees ahead, emerged a squad of armored mercs. Not bandits. Not scavengers. Uniformed. Armed. Clean. Corporate. Leah recognized the insignia instantly. Blackthorn PMC. The ones who had abandoned her 3 years ago. The ones who left her to die after crashing their prototype freighter into the jungle's heart. "Well, well," said the man at the front, removing his helmet with a smirk. "Look who made friends with the wildlife." Leah said nothing. Her face was unreadable. But the predator growled again, lower this time. The merc raised a hand. "Easy, girl," he said, speaking to the creature like it was a dog. "You're coming with us. Both of you." He aimed a shock collar launcher at the predator. The others followed. Leah stepped between them and the beast. "You shouldn't," she said quietly. Oh, but I should, he replied. You're not special. Just a rookie that got lucky. He fired. The collar shot toward the predator's throat. It never hit. The jungle erupted in fury. Not just one predator, 3 more leapt from the trees. One landed on a merc and crushed his ribs in a single motion. Another disarmed 2 men before they could scream. The last tore the shock launcher in half. Leah didn't move. She watched as her predator stood over the merc leader, claws at his throat. He was too stunned to speak. She walked over, crouched, and looked him in the eye. I didn't get lucky, she said. I got left. And I learned. She stood. The predator backed away. The man coughed once, clutching his chest, nodding furiously. Go, she said. And never come back. They ran. Not tactically. Not in formation. They ran like prey. And behind them, the jungle closed again. Leah turned back toward the bandits. No one made a sound. She adjusted the strap on her rifle, nodded once, and said, Now you know who walks first. They moved through the final stretch of jungle in silence, not because they were tired, though they were, not because the jungle demanded quiet, though it always did, but because they had seen something they didn't know how to name. Leah walked ahead, her posture unchanged, but the way the others watched her had shifted entirely. She wasn't the rookie anymore, not the quiet human with the clean boots. She was the one who fed monsters, the one whose footsteps predators traced, the one the jungle itself refused to harm. Her name wasn't spoken aloud because now it belonged to the trees, and the trees didn't tolerate lies. Every creature that had mocked her was either silent, dead, or missing. The only noise now was the rhythmic hiss of their hover sleds dragging salvaged cores and the occasional deep growl from the jungle shadows that never came closer than Leah's shadow. The path was clearer now. The canopy thinned, the soil flattened, and signs of their original drop zone became visible through the vines, charred landing markers, the remains of camp crates, and the long, clawed scratch marks that had been left by something huge during their first night. The extraction beacon had been blinking for 2 days, but no one had dared set it off until now. Leah looked at it, then looked at the sky. Something in her expression hardened. She crouched and opened a utility case from her pack, pulling out a secondary beacon. It wasn't military standard, it was custom-built, short-range, and encrypted. She didn't explain it. She just activated it, and a small green light pulsed in her palm before she tucked it back into the pouch. The squad waited near the beacon platform, eyes darting to the tree-ling. The predator hadn't reappeared. That unsettled them more than its presence ever did. The absence of a monster is heavier than its roar. The commander limped over, the bandage on his side now soaked through. He hadn't spoken much since the canyon. He'd given up on authority without formally resigning it. He stopped beside Leah, looked out toward the trees, and asked the one question he'd been trying to ignore. Is she still watching? Leah didn't look at him when she answered. She always is. She's just deciding whether to say goodbye. The words lingered in the air like mist. Then the extraction ship came. It didn't roar. It didn't blaze. It hovered incautiously, low and wide, like it knew better than to offend the place it had entered. The rear bay opened, and an armored human officer stepped out, scanning the squad. His eyes fell on Leah last. He recognized her. He looked surprised, then confused, then concerned. Not for her. For whatever had kept her alive. He motioned them aboard. The bandits moved first, dragging the sleds, still casting glances into the jungle. The commander followed, half limping. Leah stayed at the edge of the trees. She crouched again, reached into the soil, and pulled out a small totem made of bone and braid. She placed it gently near the roots of a gnarled tree, then stood. A shape moved behind her. No sound. Just motion. The apex predator emerged, not fast, not looming, just present. Its fur bristled with old scars. Its fangs were still wet from an unseen hunt. It stopped beside her, towering over her shoulder, and stared at the ship. It didn't like it. The metal. The smell. The implication. Liao reached up and pressed her hand to its jaw. They didn't exchange words. They never had to. The jungle was not a place of explanations, only decisions. I won't forget, she whispered. The predator snorted, then nuzzled its head briefly against her before turning and vanishing into the trees. It didn't look back. It never did. Liao boarded last. The ship lifted with cautious thrust, and the jungle below receded into shadow. No one spoke for several minutes. The officer finally sat across from her and cleared his throat. You were listed as missing in action, he said. Presumed dead. I was, Liao replied. What kept you alive? She looked at him, her face calm, unreadable. Then she leaned forward just enough. Everyone else screamed, she said. I didn't. The officer leaned back, unsure if it was a warning or a confession. She didn't clarify. She never did. The ship returned to orbit, then docked with the main carrier station. There, in sterile lighting and recycled air, the bandits were debriefed, scanned, and separated. Liao remained silent through every form, every question, every digital log entry. Her name was flagged for review. Multiple personnel tried to claim credit for the mission's success. One even listed her as a lucky survivor. But the jungle doesn't sign reports. It just waits. Liao was cleared. Barely. They didn't like what they couldn't understand. They didn't like the way she refused to recount her ordeal in anything more than tactical terms. She didn't talk about the predator. She didn't talk about being left behind. She didn't explain why her eyes always drifted toward the outer viewport whenever the planet came into view. They didn't need to know. They wouldn't believe her if she told them. Weeks passed. Then months. New missions came. New recruits were briefed on Tavra 4. None of them returned. Stories spread. Ghosts in the fog. Eyes in the trees. A beast that stalked the boldest. And always, someone said they saw a girl walking ahead of it, untouched, unarmed, unreadable. One day, a merc commander received an encrypted message. Short. Untraceable. It had no return ID. Only coordinates. And one sentence. You dropped the wrong one. The commander retired the next week. No explanation. And on the jungle moon of Tavra 4, where the leaves whisper and the roots taste blood, the apex predator still walks. It stalks invaders, tears apart the arrogant, and circles silently when intruders disturb the trees too loudly. But sometimes, when the air is still and the mist rolls just right, a second shape appears. A woman. Alone. Not running. Not screaming. And every creature in the jungle, every pack, every hive, every clawed nightmare, steps aside. Because they remember the girl who stayed. The one who learned their tongue. The one who fed their queen. And the one they now call Alpha.